if anyone wants to do 5x5s in the future, by all means, let us know. So a couple of house cleaning. The hashtag is StoryCode.org, so feel free to tweet on that hashtag. The network information is up there as well. So our first announcement is the first ever Story Hack. We're calling it Story Hack Beta. We're very excited. It will be hosted in the VIP room, which is also known as the Flex Space. And we're partnering with our awesome supporters at Lincoln Center and very excited about putting this on. We sent out some announcements today about it by email. So if you go to hack.storycode.org, I'll just take you to the website very quickly.
So as far as we know, this is the first official ever Story Hackathon. So even if it isn't, we're going to say it is.
Right, so it's going to be the weekend of April 28th and 29th. It'll be a true hack where we kind of start early on Saturday morning and hack all the way all night long, get to know each other very well, and then later on Sunday present the various hacks.
In this room.
In this room. Yeah. And we're still, putting the details together and appreciate the folks that have signed up and registered already. It's free to register before the 31st of March. And the approach that we're going to take for this first one is just going to be team-based. So we're looking either for people to join as a team that's already been put together, ideally a team that has a diverse group, right? So a developer, a writer, a filmmaker, et cetera. And if you don't, that's fine. We can connect you with other folks. We've had in the first day over 20 people already sign up, and we kind of know the roles and experience levels of them. So we'll be happy to connect you with members in the community.
So today's the first day that we're officially rolling it out. We're giving you guys a heads up so that you as members of our community can sign up before the general public has an opportunity to do that. We do have a limited capacity, so if you think you're interested, I would suggest you sign up ASAP.
Yep. So it's hack.storycode.org. So, and with that, we will move on to the main presentation. So we're really excited to kind of bring another, a while back we had Jim Babb who presented his project Socks Inc., which was awesome, and he really kind of gave us some really good perspective on game design, but we wanted to bring another professional to help share that. And so I'm really excited to have GREG TREFRY here to talk about game design, gaming mechanics, and gaming mechanics. So Greg is the co-founder of Come Out and Play. I don't know if anyone has gone to the festival before, but it's a really amazing festival. They've put it on here in New York and in San Francisco, and it basically turns the city into a giant playground. So hopefully Greg will tell us about the upcoming one this year. Greg has designed everything from web-based MMOs to hit casual games to ARGs. He's the co-founder of Gigantic Mechanic and was the creative director at GameStar Mechanic. He teaches at NYU's ITP and Parsons New School for Design. He's also got a book out called Casual Game Design. Can you get that on Amazon? So check it out. And with that, we'll turn it over to Greg. So this mic works.
Okay, cool. All right. All right. My name's Greg, and I have a company called Gigantic Mechanic, and we make games. We do a lot of games that kind of connect to the. Sorry, just all right. Can you guys all hear me without the mic, or do I need the? All right, definitely the mic. All right. Okay, so we do a lot of games that kind of connect play through with the real world in some way. So I'd love to say that we invented street ball. Unfortunately, we didn't. We did do a game called Gigaputt, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is a sort of outdoor golf game using your iPhone. So a bit about my experience. I've worked on casual games like JoJo's Fashion Show, which is a downloadable game. Thus, I'm so well dressed, as you can see. This was it was a kind of a paper dolling game for the casual market. This is when I worked back at a company called Game Lab. What's that? Game Lab also worked on, we did stuff like Diner Dash while we were there. I wrote a book called Casual Game Design. My partner, Mattia Romeo, worked on a game called Pac-Manhattan, which was about strapping giant foam cheese wheels to yourself and running around the streets of Manhattan. And the idea behind this game, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, about how sort of play interacts with the real world, was, I think when they were putting together this game, they were kind of looking at the area around Washington Square Park, and you're like, oh, that looks kind of like a Pac-Man grid. And so they, went out and built this game, which then use the grid around there. And once you kind of play that game, it's very hard to not look at that area around Washington Square Park and not see that Pac-Man grid. I run a festival called the Come Out and Play Festival. Is it possible to get one of the little wireless mics? Awesome. That would be cool. All right. Very nice. Okay, so I run a festival called the Come Out and Play Festival, which was mentioned. So this is, we've run it now for, I guess, 6 years in Manhattan, and then a couple years in San Francisco. And it's a big festival of outdoor street games. I know some people have been here. Jim's run games that Come Out and Play. Brian, you've played. Did you ever run a game at Come Out? Okay, maybe this year. So each year we solicit people to submit games, and we get people from around the world to submit and design games. It's going to be this year on July 13th and 14th down at South Street Seaport on the 13th, and then out on Governor's Island on the 14th. So we're calling it Come Out and Play After Dark on the 13th. It's all night games, people running around the streets causing trouble. And then on Governor's Island, more new field sports. So what do games that Come Out and Play look like? They're things like this. This was a game called Manhattan Mega Putt from I think the first year. It's basically just putt through Tompkins Square Park and around Lower Manhattan, and it's just basically use the same mechanics that you get in a game of putt golf, but you entertain this nice old lady who's sitting in the park. Then there's games we've done. This was a game done by Josh DeBonis and Nick Mikros called Pitfall Live. It was basically just a sort of big blown up version of that classic arcade game Pitfall. And you get ropes and you swing on them and jump, and so it's basically just a big spectacle. This was a game called Circle Rules Football. This is an example of one of those new sports. This is done by a guy named Greg Manley, who was in the experimental theater program at New York University, and was like, games seem like really interesting bits of theater. I wonder what I could do with those. And and so for his thesis, he put together this game called Circle Rules, which was the idea was to really make a piece of theater, and then what he wound up doing was making the sport, and the theater eventually kind of melted away, and it became just about the sport. And it uses this big yoga ball, and there's a goal in the middle, and people get really into it. Has anybody ever played Circle Rules? It's awesome. It's really good. He plays it every week in Prospect Park, so during the summer. So I highly recommend checking it out. And it was interesting, and that was a really interesting example of how someone makes a sport in like this game, they're like, I'm going to even the playing field, and it'll be this big yoga ball, and everyone can kind of get into it. And then, people get super aggressive about it, and it starts looking more and more like the same culture that you get in games like soccer or football. So games kind of tend to do that. They kind of tend towards super competitiveness, even when you try and take that out of them. So this is a game called Journey to the Night. This has been running, we ran it the first Come Out and Play, and it's been running every year since out in San Francisco. It was done by a group called SF0, and it's basically a big game of zombie tag. So is anyone familiar with zombie tag? It's a folk game that little kids play. So, so if we were to play zombie tag, I would start out as it, and then I would tag you, and then we're both it, and then we keep tagging people, and then until eventually there's one person left, and we've got like 50 people chasing them, and it's totally terrifying, and it's like being in a zombie movie. Except the zombies are fast. In this game was quite interesting, and so what they did is they played it across all of Manhattan, or Lower Manhattan. They kind of gave everyone these maps here. That said where you had to go, and these sort of, you had to go check in at these checkpoints as you kind of made your way through Lower Manhattan. And the really cool part about it was this guy, Alex Fleetwood here. He was a tourist. He'd come to the festival to play some games, and he was from London. And he's like, I was in New York for a couple days before Come Out and Play, and it was really nice. And then I played this movie, and it was like being in I played this game, and it was like being in a John Carpenter movie. It was like the most horrifying, awesome experience I've ever had, running away from like these 250 people that were chasing me through New York. And then he liked it so much, he went back and started a festival in London called Hide and Seek, which is very much like come out and play. So it was a very transformative experience, at least for Alex. So a little bit about what we do at Gigantic Mechanic. We do some game design consulting, and we do a little bit of our own development. This is our lab. Anyway, I won't bore you with that because it's not very interesting. So I guess what I want to do today is talk a little bit about games and sort of a couple of projects I've worked on over the last couple of years and some of the lessons I've learned about it. And so I want to keep it relatively casual. And so if people have questions as I go, just feel free to let me know. And if not, we'll get to them at the end. But before I kind of dive into those specific projects, I want to talk a little bit about like game design in general. And so I know Jim had come and talked about some stuff. And so there's all sorts of different ways to define games and what games are and what they do. But there's sort of about this. I think Bernard Suits had sort of the best definition, which is sort of the voluntary effort to overcome unnecessary obstacles, right? So that guy could have run the 100-meter dash so much easier if he didn't have to jump over those damn hurdles. But jumping over those hurdles kind of made it more interesting in some way, and so making games is very much about that. It's about finding obstacles to put in people's way to make the thing interesting. And sometimes you do it right and you put the right obstacle in their way and it's fun, and sometimes you don't and someone falls on their head. And let's hope he makes it. So the role of the game designer, so it's about kind of taking this moment of play. So this girl here is kicking around a ball, and it's sort of an instinctual sort of thing. She's got this ball, and what do you do with it? You kick it, and then you kind of take that moment of play. This is what a game designer does: is kind of take that moment of play and then transform that into a game, like formalize it. Like what are the goals and rules you put around that sort of thing? So in many ways, like what this person is doing and what Steven Gerrard is doing, are kind of two bits of the same thing. He's just trying for a goal and he's paid a lot more money, and FIFA regulates how tall his socks have to be. Whereas this is sort of a more unadulterated moment of soccer. So it's very much about taking this sort of core idea in a game and then figuring out like what can I do with that. So this is Super Mario. Most people here have played or seen Super Mario Brothers at some point, I assume. So who knows what the core idea, what is Super Mario Brothers? What is the main thing in Super Mario Brothers? What's that? What's that? Yeah, save the princess. That's your goal. You have to get and save the princess. But like, what is the sort of the core idea? At the heart of it? Collect coins. You do collect coins. That is how you get more lives. That is jump. Who said jump? All right. Yes, you act as a plumber, although he doesn't do much plumbing. Yes, it's jumping, right? So like before Super Mario Brothers, back when he was just in Donkey Kong, his name was Jumpman, right? And so when Miyamoto was making Super Mario Brothers, it's like he's got this idea of jumping, and it's like, what are all the things I can jump on? I can jump on mushrooms, I can jump on turtles, I can jump over plants, I can jump on platforms. And so he takes that one idea, and then extrapolate it out in all these different ways to kind of figure out explore the entire possibility space of that thing. So the game designer is very much, you find that core mechanic, and so whether that be like kicking in soccer, like soccer boils down to basically like kicking a ball past somebody. It's sort of, that's sort of the beating heart of soccer in some way. Then you kind of extrapolate that out, and it's about passing, and it's about defense, and the offsides rule, and that sort of thing. But this is all about like giving people those clear goals. And in soccer, the clear goal is kick that ball into the goal. In Super Mario Bros., it's jump on people till you can save the princess. And then you write up the game designer writes up the rules, and it looks like these big long spec documents if you're making software, or a series of rules if you're making a board game. And then you build that thing, and then you give it to people to play with, and they inevitably do something with it which you didn't expect, and they break it, and you're like, nuts, I got to fix that. And so you go back and you do it all again. Because games are like these living systems. Like you kind of come up with this really great idea, and then you give it to somebody, these players, and players are like have minds of their own, and they fuck it up. But they also do really cool things that you didn't expect, and that's what's kind of fun about being a game designer, is figuring out what was cool about what they did that you didn't expect, and then kind of bringing that out in the game. So a couple projects we've worked on, and some sort of lessons learned from them. So
don't want to talk too much about the sort of theoretical part about games, but really the meat of like some of the practice that we've done. So as I said, we do a lot of games about the real world in some way. So we do a lot of games about location. Obviously with Come Out and Play is very much about like specific places and events. We've made some mobile games that have been in that vein as well. So, and the reason we do that is I think the real world kind of rocks, right? So these people are playing Ninja in Denmark. Yeah, I think they're in Denmark, which is this awesome, it's kind of a new folk game. It's this sort of hand-slapping game and everyone gets to be a ninja. Has anyone here played Ninja at all? And did you enjoy Ninja? Ninja's awesome, right? You should all play it. So it's this great, the great thing about playing Ninja is you get to interact with your friends and you get to take on the role of a ninja and it's totally silly and you think at the beginning, you're like, I'm not going to do that. But as soon as everyone's like, 3, 2, 1, Ninja, it's kind of awesome and sort of all your inhibitions sort of melt away and you kind of, the game takes over. Because the real world's really awesome and it's pretty and it's full of things and, I always think that's like, it's just more high resolution and interesting than, your PS3 is ever going to be. There's some, especially if you find the right places. And the world is full of people and you get to like interact with them and it's fun to be known and to feel social. And there are places which are valuable to you, like going to Cheers and whatever. And so if there's some way that you can, tap into that with games, it's really interesting. So here's why the real world sucks for designing games. It's really, really big and empty oftentimes, right? Like there's just not a lot of people around in a lot of it. You kind of forget that when you're thinking about New York. Like all these people want to make location. When people think about location-based games, they generally live in San Francisco or New York City, and they're like, "There's lots of people around. I'll run into players all the time." But you have to think like, "Oh, if I live in Montana, there's not that many people around." It rains a lot. The real world is pretty unpredictable, and can often ruin the sort of experiences you're making. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to design around that. And also, sometimes when the world is really empty, it's also really full of a lot of people in certain places, right? So, you want to do. Oftentimes, you want to make games where you get to feel a sense of accomplishment. But like, if these people were all playing a game in this gigantic crowd, and they're all playing, that guy doesn't feel like he's very special. Neither is that guy or that guy or that guy. So you got to figure out how, when it is really compact and there are lots of people around, how you start to break up the space so that people feel special and feel a sense of accomplishment. Also, sometimes the real world is just confusing. So we made this game called Gigaput, which I'll show you, and it taught us a lot of lessons about making mobile games. We made a lot of games for Come Out and Play over the years, and which were very much event-based, and we got to run them and see like exactly how people were going to do stuff, and then we kind of, then we're like, oh, we'll put all of that knowledge into this great iPhone app because we've solved this problem. Where if anybody's going to crack this nut, it's going to be us. And we were wrong. But one of the things we kind of, after making that, we kind of came to this realization that in some ways, like the Wii tennis of location-based games is Foursquare, right? So how many people have used Foursquare at some point? All right, that's a lot. How many people checked in now that are checked in? Okay, it's amazing. Because like 5 years ago, that notion never would have occurred to you, right? That you check in at places. It's like this weird new learned behavior, right? What is I think is really interesting when you look at both the Wii and Foursquare, and I think this is where draw this analogy out a little bit. So how many people have played with the Wii? It's have used a Wii. Okay. So it's this fantasy of the Wii, right? Like this is it. You're going to be like out there playing in tennis, and it's going to be amazing. You're going to be at Barcade in Williamsburg and having these tournaments, and I'm really getting exercise and playing the Wii. And then there's sort of the reality of playing Wii tennis, which looks like this dude. Which is like that you sit on your couch. Once you learn that really all you have to do is go like that. And you're like, all right, well, this is really great. But that's okay because on the back of that fantasy of what you're doing, that you're going to play Wii tennis and be athletic and everything, they sold 87 million units of the Wii, right? Basically, I would argue, basically on the backs of Wii tennis alone, right? Like that game, there's lots of other nice things on the Wii, but that game was really like, that's like, oh yeah. That really got at the fantasy of it. And so there's the fantasy of Foursquare too, right? Like of location-based games. It's like you're gonna be like Dennis, and you're like, woo, I'm partying, I'm gonna meet all my friends, and everything. And then there's sort of the reality of Foursquare, which is that you check in at the bagel shop. every day, right? And so, like, this is clearly a meaningful moment for Dennis Crowley, and and you're like, oh God, that's really lame. But who knows? Maybe that's like a really awesome moment for her every day. Like she likes going to that bagel store, and is proud of owning that place, right? And so they figured out like these mechanics about like of being the mayor of places that are meaningful to people. And so on the back of sort of the reality of Wheat Tennis, they've had like 750 million check-ins over the years. And so then there's like the fantasy of location-based games, right? Which is that like you're going to be doing this. So this is a game done by a group in England called Blast Theory. It's called I think this is from Can You See Me Now? A lot of their games look kind of similar, or they're older ones. And so this guy's like, he's got this GPS device and he's running around, and he's got this backpack on, and just from the way they took the photo, you think like there's got to be helicopters following him, and he's like an action star in an action movie. And then there's sort of, and that's kind of what we were thought. We're going to make this game like this Gigaput game, and you're going to go out with your iPhone, and you're going to walk around, play golf, and it's going to be amazing. And then there's the reality of running around the real world, which is that it's like a sweaty, hot, messy thing to do that like in the distance is really far. Like, so this guy, he may have had fun running that marathon, but he's not having fun now. Like, it looks like he's miserable. And so that's something you have to deal with when you're making them. And there's also the reality of location-based games is that like they're not like you're not being an action star most of the time. Most of the time you're just sitting on the subway like playing Angry Birds or something like that. That these bits of gaming aren't like these big things that you that take over your life. That they're like these little games that fit in the interstices of your day, right? The way that Angry Birds does, or the way that Words with Friends does. They've been very clever about the sort of design of those games, that they don't ask you for very much time. They ask you for about 30 seconds or so, or 15 seconds. And then maybe you play Angry Birds for an hour and a half because it's addictive. But like they tell you, if you give us 10 seconds, you'll have fun. And whereas I think one of the big problems with this is we asked you for 30 minutes. We're like, oh, come with us for 30 minutes. You're going to have this great experience. You're going to go in this derive around your neighborhood. And that's a really big ask of people. And there's also the reality of location, right? Which is that most of us like don't go very many different places. So you have this idea that you're going to make this game and they're going to explore all these new areas. But most of us follow the same path with like something like 96 or 7% predictability. Like you can basically always guess where you're going to be at any given moment. And so the reality of that is something you're fighting against too, is like if you make a game that someone's like, often I hear people say like, I'm going to make this game and it's going to ask people to like go over here and explore this and go there. People will not do it. They will not go out of their way to do anything. I can't stress that enough. But they will go to the same places every day, so you figure like, how do you make location meaningful in that context, right? Like, so how do you get people how do you play on top of the things that they're going to? And that's what the sort of the brilliance of Foursquare, right? It's like checking into the bagel store is totally fine because you go there every day and you have the sense of ownership over it. It's not asking you to go somewhere new and explore something new. So we took all those lessons from Gigaput. This sort of, we asked too much of people. We asked them to go walk a block out of their way, which was retarded in the end, and too much to ask. And we said like, okay, how are we gonna roll that back? So we're gonna like do something where we ask them for much shorter periods of time, and that we play more on places they're going. So we came up with this idea for this game called Alphabet City, which we're working on now. And the idea behind this game is it's sort of like Foursquare meets Boggle. So you get a list of all the locations around, a bunch of restaurants around you and bars or neighborhood names, and then you pick one of those, and then you play this Boggle-like game on it. So it's like just a simple word game where you play anagrams on it. You try and make however many anagrams you can, and you score points. And then if you get the high score on it, you're the wordsmith of Two Tom's Restaurant or whatever it is in your neighborhood, or you're the wordsmith of Brooklyn or Gowanus or the Upper West Side. And so our idea behind this was like to figure out like how do we like scale back that unit of interaction that we're asking for to something that was a little bit more reasonable and likely in the end. to actually get people to do. Because it's one of those things where we should have realized with like Gigaput, it's like when we would go play test it, we actually had to build a second mode in Gigaput where you could just play it on, called like couch mode, and that's all we would do. And at that point we should have realized like, oh, there's a problem here, but people will love walking around. So we're working on this game now. Hopefully they'll be out in a couple months, but at the rate we move, maybe a couple years. But yeah, so that's sort of the idea behind that one. So what we kind of, our big lessons and takeaways from that were like, what you want to do is you want to sell to the fantasy. You want to give people the fantasy they're going to go and explore new things, right, and see new places, and that they play this location-based game. It's going to like open up the world to them, and they'll see it in a whole new way. And then what you want to do is like sort of design to the actual behavior of people. So the big thing about game design you can't forget is like people have very ingrained patterns, and you can sometimes fight against those patterns, but it's really hard. And so going back to that sort of Wii tennis and Foursquare analogy is like, a bunch of people checked in here. That's like a weird new behavior that people had to learn over time. And so then you have to figure out as a game designer, how do I leverage behaviors like that? If I ask you to like make a new behavior whole cloth, that's a really big hurdle to climb. But if you can figure out other behaviors that people are already doing or little bits of their day that you can kind of capture, you'll probably have a lot more success. All right, so that was sort of a designing for location, and really when we were making those games, that was very much about like we had these very high concepts about what we wanted the game to be like, and then figured out eventually what the game should look like based off some simple mechanics that we started with. So this one I want to approach. This is another game I worked on last fall. Called Charge the Rubber Ball Brigade. It's much more lo-fi than the other one. And this one I kind of took a different approach, and this was kind of coming at it from a different angle. So there's a game designer named Marc LeBlanc who has this sort of rubric for game design called Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. Is anyone familiar with Marc? Okay, awesome. I've introduced something new. It's a really great paper. If you just Google MDA and LeBlanc, you'll find the paper, and it's a really nice way to think about both game design, but also just sort of interaction design in many ways. So the idea behind it is like, so you have a game like here, like football, right? And you've got all these, these very specific rules which delineate how football should work. It's like, oh, the end zone should be, I guess, 20 yards long, and it's 100 yards this way and 55 yards to here, and then there's all these rules about how people interact within football. It's like, oh, if you have the ball, you can run with it and you can throw it, and after 3 downs or after 4 downs, if you haven't moved 10 yards, you have to kick it. And so there are all these like very specific like rules, and these are the sort of the mechanics of the game. And then that set of mechanics lead to a set of end up in a sort of, set of dynamics in how the game gets played. So, there's no rules in football that say like, oh, someone has to run around here and go up here and that guy has to run that way. Those are sort of naturally occurring dynamics that come out of this sort of set of rules that make up football. And then those, and so there are these dynamics which are like people pass the ball and run with the ball and tackle each other to stop each other. And then those like dynamic, and then there's this whole like set of like, it's sort of this back and forth, and those dynamics then lead to what you would call like aesthetics, right? Which is like the way the game looks and feels and plays, right? So here's Victor Cruz catching a touchdown, and there's like this, it's sort of this moment of like real beauty here, right? Like that football allowed for, right? It's he's not only is he scoring, but it's like you get this feeling when you watch it, like it's like, oh, that's like a beautiful balletic sort of play, and that football, all the sort of dynamics that went into it of like you have to move the ball and you're kind of against these other people, and it's going back and forth, and then that eventually leads to sort of this aesthetic feeling that you get out of watching and playing football. And sort of you can use this approach to kind of think about games in both from an analysis and a sort of design perspective. So you could also go the other way, right? So how many people here played Rock Band at some point? Okay, so like the designers of Rock Band from when Harmonix was making that, I think they probably started with an aesthetic goal. They wanted you to play Rock Band and feel like Mick Jagger back when he was, still, and Keith Richards wasn't walking zombie. So it's like, but you get this like, they wanted you to feel like this like, just really awesome rock star on stage, and really how are they going to capture that aesthetic feeling, right? And so then they have to develop a set of like, how they get that out of like a set of dynamics. So you've got this beat matching game. It's like, I go tick, 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 like that, and I give you these guitars, and these kind of boil down to the mechanics of it. It's like they could have done so many things, but they figured out like, oh, like to make that work mechanically, I've got to give you this like guitar, because if you're playing it on your controller like that, you really don't feel much like a rock star, but if you're playing that's much more satisfying. It allows you to do that. And, it's really hard to and have it feel credibly like a rock star. So they took all those sort of mechanics and eventually worked their way back from. They worked their way down from this like slowly to this sort of thing. So you get this feeling of like this. I'm playing with my friends, and it's yeah, we're like rocking out. Or you play it like this. And what's amazing is like these two people are like, they're playing like the same game, right? And they're like a band too. It's like, it's totally incredible. And that sort of, and they made me feel really awesome at this moment because the sort of the set of dynamics and rules and mechanics are sort of allowing for that. So onto the game. So that's a sort of an approach I take a lot oftentimes with games, is like figuring out like what is sort of like in my aesthetic goal for this. Like what do I want this to be like, and then what would I need to use? Like how would I create a set of rules and dynamics that would inform that thing and elicit that emotion or feeling in someone. So last summer I was doing a lot of reading about the Civil War. Actually, all last year. I was like that guy who read about the Civil War and then would like talk about it with everybody. I was like, oh, did you know it's like at the Battle of people like. No one likes that. But anyway, I was but I get to bend all of your ears about it now. So I've been reading a lot about the Civil War, and I read Michael Shara's book, Killer Angels, about the Battle of Gettysburg, and I was like, oh, that's really, which culminates eventually in Pickett's charge, like all these people running up the hill, and it's this horrible, brutal moment in the Civil War, and it's like it's total nonsense. Like why Lee had them do it is crazy. You have to be insane to have done that, to send all these people, and you have to be insane to be one of the soldiers that marched across this huge long field with like the Union artillery barraging you. And so I wanted to make a game that sort of in some way like got at some little element of that, like this element of like that I'm going to run and do this sort of crazy thing. That I'm going to charge across this big open field, and when I do it, I'm most likely just going to be mowed down. My chances of making it are low to nil. And to kind of get at this idea of like what it felt like to be in that moment, that tiny little moment. It's like clearly I wasn't going to, and so you could like I could make a simulation game on. The computer to do that, or I could make a role-playing game, or we could pick a board game to do that. I clearly thought, dodgeball would be a really great way to do that. So I was like, whoa, that has this element of like all these things flying at you, right? So what could I do with that? Like, how could I make that feel like that moment in Pickett's charge? So like dodgeball starts like this, so imagine dodgeball's like this. You've got like this two sides and these players on either side, and they've got balls, and they're throwing them at each other, and that's sort of what dodgeball looks like, usually with a couple more people. But that wasn't quite the aesthetic I wanted, and that game already existed, so I didn't really want to design that. So I was like, what if there was a lot more people? And like that's what like Pickett's charge was like. There was just a lot of people, and that's how you kind of got this notion of chaos, because that's what I wanted. I wanted this sort of feeling of chaos and that you weren't necessarily important, but your sacrifice was important. And I was like, but if I had a lot of people, I need a lot more balls. That would also make it feel like a barrage, right? Like, so oftentimes when you're playing dodgeball, they're like one person throws the ball and then other one's kind of like this. I just wanted like tons of balls so that you're just sort of doing this half the time, sort of just avoiding them. That it feels like they're just flying at you from on far. So I was like, okay, I think I could do that. I can make like a really big game of dodgeball, come out and play, where it's like across an entire field, and we've got like 100 or so players, and we'll have like 150 or 200 balls of all different sizes. We'll get like big yoga balls and tiny little balls and bean bags and all sorts of stuff. So it feels like this massive stuff coming. I was like, but that still doesn't get this notion of charging, because when you play dodgeball, everyone's sort of like, it's like if we go back to that other photo, right? Like everyone's standing at the back, and then occasionally one guy runs up and throws something, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to have to kind of go up and sort of get pelted with stuff and to feel that chaos. So I was like, I'd have to make them, what I want to do is I actually want them to run onto the other person's side, right? I want these people to come over here and get these flags and run back with them, and these guys have to get these flags and come back with them there. So unlike dodgeball where you stay on your side, this was like, I gotta like charge into there, and if I go over there, they're all just gonna throw lots of balls at me, because I'm in their territory and there's a lot more of them. And that was starting to get at what I wanted. Like it's like this sort of like aesthetic feeling of like, oh, you know, like there's this sort of, there's this danger in doing the thing I'm being asked to do, which goes against all of my instincts in dodgeball, which is to hang at the back and be like this solo like operator who throws the ball. This was like, no, you've got to just run over to the other side. Most likely you're not coming back. Maybe somebody does. And then I thought, like, I also don't want people to stand up at the edge of the line and like, you know, just throw each other like this. I want it to feel again like a sort of Civil War battle back before they had canoidal bullets, and so you couldn't aim quite, although they did kind of have canoidal bullets, but you generally didn't aim as far. Like it was much less accurate. So I was like, okay, well, I'll put this this sort of neutral zone in the middle. So you know, this team can only run up to here and throw, and this team can only run up to here and throw, and so they've got this very inaccurate sort of sense of like I can come here and my throw has to be like that, way over the other side, versus like come up and just peg somebody. So again, to sort of get at this sort of feeling of inaccuracy and lots of chaos. So this is a game we played out in San Francisco in November, and so this is the gray lining up to play, and here's the red, and they're all getting ready for battle. They've all had the rules explained to them. They all got their ball, and then you know the game starts, and it's like charge, and the balls start flying through the air, and then slowly the people and when they played it, it was really interesting to watch them play it, because they played it kind of like they would play dodgeball, right? Like, so you'd be like, okay, charge, and everyone's like, okay, and they kind of back up and throw the balls at each other, and so because that's sort of their normal behavior is like, oh, dodgeball, I throw it from a distance, and so when you do that, what they quickly realize is like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get the flags that way, right? Like that's like I may get them out, but the thing was I added to the game was the game wasn't about getting people out. So it wasn't just about eliminating all the players. This is the other part of like making you go across, was that once you got wounded, like you got hit, you just fell down wherever you were. Instead of like leaving the game, you would lay down on the ground, and then you could call for a medic. And there were players here, these ones with armbands, who were medics, and they could come around and revive you. And all they had to do was they had to run up and touch you on the forehead, then you could run back into the game. And so what you got really quickly was like this, with this mass of players, was this sort of field littered with all these people on the ground being like, medic, medic. And I was like, that's what I wanted. It's starting to look like a Civil War battle. It's just like this sort of human carnage here, and these people sort of running around. And then eventually people started realizing like, okay, I've got to go across to get these flags. And so they would, here's this guy, he's getting mowed down. And then this guy, like he runs across, and he's like got the gray flag, blue flag, and he's getting back to the other side. And so what, and the teams that did the best were the ones who realized what they really had to do was not go individually, but to go as a big group. They had to like decide like, we're all gonna go together, because most of us aren't gonna make it. And so you'd see them like stealing themselves, like, all right, we're gonna go, ready? And then they'd all 20 of them would all run across, and then they would get to the flag, and then people would be pelting balls at them, and then most of them would fall, but one of them would grab the flag like that guy and book it back across the line with it. And so you had to, once you got the 3 flags back to your side, you'd won, and it went in several rounds throughout the game. And so, watching it play, it played very much like what I wanted, and you talk to people about, I was talking to people about it afterwards, and they were like, yeah, it was like totally chaotic, and like the thing that like it went, like they would talk about like, yeah, it's like I just, like that moment where I was like, I guess we just have to go, like we just have to run over there and charge. And so watching that sort of learned behavior develop was really interesting. The other really interesting thing I learned with this game was that games tend to break down at a certain point, right? So this game, there was like, 100 some odd players playing it and all these different balls. And at the beginning we'd said, oh, we're going to have a bunch of refs and we're going to watch you guys. And so we were standing on the outside, like calling people out, being like, you're hit. And most people were really good about it. And so the game was played a game would last was played in 3 rounds. Each round was 5 minutes. And in between rounds, they would gather up their balls and we'd replace the flags and that sort of thing. And they would play another round. And we played several games of that. So these guys were all playing for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. In the first game, everyone played very gentlemanly, and they would get hit with the ball, then fall down and call for the medic. And as the game went on, as they played it like about an hour and 10 minutes into it, just all the social mores broke down in many ways. And so I would like watch people get popped in the face with a dodgeball, and they would just keep running, like, you're out. And they're like, what? No, I'm not. And you're like, you were just hit in the face with a dodgeball. But people just get so amped and into it that they forget that they're playing this game and that they're obeying certain rules. And initially they're playing by the rules because they have the sense that you're watching them, right? And so a game like this, and this is a real problem with designing very big experiences, right? Or big games. Like when you watch someone play basketball, when you're like reffing basketball, there's 10 people on the court and there's like 2 or 3 refs sometimes. And so they can keep their eye on everybody. And even then they miss tons of fouls, but there's a sense that the game is under control. And so here we had like 100 people and we had like 4 or 5 refs watching it. And so initially they thought it was under control. And then eventually people, I don't think they were cheating, they just sort of internalized the fact that no one was ever going to catch them cheating. And so like the game sort of started to devolve. So by the end of it, like in the last game, I would call time. I'd be like, okay, the game's over. And people just kept running at each other and throwing balls. I'd be like, the game is over. Please stop. And so it was as a game designer, it was one of these really interesting lessons in like you design these big experiences, and then how do you manage that many people, and how do you and then how do you design the rules of your game so that like maybe it's okay that game broke after an hour, and that's that like after an hour and a half, like the people had gotten too competitive to play it anymore, but because they had fun for that till that moment. So it's something to kind of think about as you're designing stuff. Is like when you get these big experiences, like what point is it okay that they're broken? Ideally you want your game to last forever. It's like a beautiful little object which will always plays the same way, but that's just not always the case, especially with like big, massive, crazy experiences. So those are a couple. Two projects that I've worked on in the last years are obviously very different, one high-tech, one very low-tech, but often both very much informed by the sort of same type of thinking. So people have questions or things they would love to talk about, share?
Specifically about the Civil War dodgeball, did you have and did you have to deal with the idea of ammunition hoarding, people hoarding balls?
Yeah, there was talk that would be the exploit, right? Some people were like, oh, you know what we should do? We should just get all of the balls on our side, and then we'll have them all. And it never happened because people would get them and then they would just throw them back. It was amazing to watch people do it. And there was enough people on your team that you could kind of never consistently get everyone to follow the same strategy. So there was, like a big battle, there was like pockets of people doing that and then pockets of people at the other end doing entirely other random things.
Questions? Yeah, so I'm going to ask people to speak into the mic just because we're recording this.
So also off of the Civil War game, did you start to see battlefield psychology happen? Did you start to see commanders come out and things like that?
Yeah, there was that, there were definitely players who sort of became leaders within it, and they would kind of be the ones who at the beginning saying let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. But then it usually kind of broke down a lot, and again, kind of reflecting a Civil War battle, in that it was sort of because it was this big mass of players. Once it's got going, sort of everyone's strategies sort of went to hell until they got to that moment, or just went to pot until they got to that moment where we just all have to charge, because that was basically the only thing you should really do. And so it was there was just moments when the teams would organize enough to be able to do that. But for the most other part, it was just there was a little bit of people being like, don't throw the balls, don't throw the balls, and then, what? Yeah, it was interesting.
Over here.
Kind of along the same lines, I guess thinking about it in the long term, say this became a big game and they started playing it on playgrounds and then it became an Olympic sport. Do you see, or can you speak to how strategy might play off the field? And do you think that strategy could happen in preparation for a game and then go into a game, and how would that change the dynamic of specifically the dodgeball Civil War thing?
Do you mean of that game in particular, or, okay, specifically that one?
But just maybe there's a general theory you can talk about.
Right. So specifically in that one, I don't know. So that game, would it work as a competitive sport? It would, no. It's too, right now, it's too loose. So like, again, going back to that issue of judging, right? So when games get competitive, you have to, and you put them in very competitive contexts, like the Olympics, right? You have to, they're looked at through this microscope, and you have to be able to know the state of the game at any given moment, right? And that's a super important idea in game design. Is like, what is the state of everything here? Now the problem with this game, with Charge of the Rubber Ball Brigade, is that there's too many balls. There's just far too many balls. Like, the game would work if there was like enough balls that I could watch, right? So if you think of, again, like a game like basketball or football, like, so football has, like, how many people on a team in football? It's like, yeah, there's 11 people on the field, so there's 20 on each team, so there's like 22, whatever, on either side, and there's all this stuff going on, and people running into it, and there's a holding penalty on every play in football, but it only gets called occasionally if it happens near the ball, because where people look in football is like near the ball. And here, because that's sort of where the main state of the game is, right? That's sort of where it's all being held. And the problem with this game is, like, there's so many balls. The state of the game is spread out like across 120 balls in this large area. And so for the refs, they can't like really see at all like what's going on. So to make it work like feasibly, you'd have to have some other technical use technology to find some way to judge it, to know that I was hit with a ball or not. Because like once people figure out that they're not being watched closely, they'll start sort of fudging on the rules a little bit. So that would probably make Charge of the Rubber Ball Brigade prohibitively expensive. But that's sort of like why I see, like, as a competitive sport, it gets to be an issue. But yeah, certainly I think you could go into the game with strategies. Like, I have an idea of, I think, how you should win, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I don't know. I never got to play, I just got to judge it.
Hi, great presentation, thank you. I think a lot of what you were talking about today could apply to all sorts of games, and I'm not sure you have this experience necessarily, but a lot of, I think, some of the key takeaways you had were more for mobile gaming, like you need to fit into people's 30 seconds of time, but there's no denying that there's kind of this existing marketplace for big, massive time sucks of games, more platform type stuff. And I was wondering if you had any kind of key concepts, things you could have us start thinking about, or just personal impressions on the difference between those kind of developments.
Yeah. The same lesson applies. Even the big time-sucking games now. I mean, the way the game market is shifting is very much like a very sort of casual style of play, and you see it in like everything from the popularity of Facebook games to even the way that World of Warcraft or like something like that, which is like a more classically hardcore game is structured. It's broken down into tinier and tinier little chunks. And it really very much is about that idea of that you ask people for very, these sort of short bursts of time. So like the sort of the days of like big appointment style gaming, I think have probably seen, I just think that they're sort of on the wane. If you look at like where like things are going with Facebook, where they're going with mobile games, where they're going even with like Xbox Live and PlayStation Home and that sort of thing, they're kind of more pushing towards a casual style play. Not to say there aren't still big hardcore titles out there, and I think there will continue to be, but even those games are starting to get informed very much by sort of these sort of mechanics of like, how do you hook people in, like lure people in with like the promise of very short bursts of play, and then kind of hook them and then try to keep them for longer. And that's informed by a couple things. Aging demographics for gamers. The average male gamer, I think, is in their mid to late 30s by now, and they just don't have as much time to sit down and play Call of Duty all night as they used to. And then if you start looking at like gaming across a wider spectrum, it doesn't look like what your stereotypical like, oh, it's all 12-year-old sweaty boys in their basements. It's actually like a lot of, sort of I used to make casual games, and it was like our sort of stereotypical notion was like of the Midwestern housewife, and that's like you have to figure out how you're going to design for that. So the sort of what gaming audiences look like is very varied. But I do think that sort of those key lessons apply of like figure out what your core mechanic is, figure out how that appeals to someone very quickly, and draws them in and allows them to get to some sort of form of mastery, or some form, not mastery, I'm sorry, a form of like proficiency relatively quickly. So they feel like they know what they're doing, and then try and make the road to mastery a lot longer. Does that kind of answer your question?
All right, cool. We're going to take 2 more questions. You had one? Thank you.
Hi. I love that dodgeball game.
Thanks.
Primarily because I guess the social metamorphosis that happened. You said that people were coming in and they're, very gentlemanly, and then by the end of it, everyone is kind of sweating on top of each other, and
Right.
all the walls have been brought down.
Right.
So if you look at us as a group right now,
Right.
what kind of game would best get us playing together and break the walls down and,
So what would be the best game for you all to play right now? I think Ninja is a great game for that. Like it's like one of these, like, and this is something I think is I was talking to we run these playtesting sessions every weekend, and this guy was showing this game, and like what Ninja does so right, I think, is that first moment of it when you're like 3, 2, 1 Ninja, and like it's sort of everyone, like the beginning of the game is you're supposed to, like, everyone sort of stands in this tight little circle, and then we all jump back into like a ninja pose, and once you do that, it like sort of breaks down those barriers very quickly. And so like there's this issue with games and making them, which is that like I make games for a living and play them a lot, and I don't usually want to play new ones. I'm like, oh God, I want to learn a bunch of fucking rules, and it's going to be confusing and everything. I'll just play Scrabble or something I already know. And so when you're getting someone to do a new thing, and there's also the sense of like I'm going to be bad at it, or I'm going to look like, if it's in the real world, I'm going to look like a fool doing it. And so what you have to do is like have some way that the game draws, like, again, gets people in very quickly, and so some little bit of ritual like Ninja is great. Like it evens the playing field. Like no one looks cool being like 3, 2, 1 Ninja. So we're all on the sort of same level of dorkiness at that point, and that just gives everyone a little bit of license to play, which is really nice. And then once someone starts and then you still maybe even thinking, well, I'm not going to be really into this, but as soon as when someone tries to slap your hand, you're like, the game takes over, and you're like, oh, you're not going to beat me. And so and oftentimes I find that a lot with like real world games. Like every time I play a new one, there's this sort of notion of like, I don't want to run down the street. People are going to laugh at me or think I'm look like an idiot. And so, and then as soon as I see someone run by me, you're like, oh, no, you don't. And then you're like, and then once I'm running and jumping over things, the game takes over and, and draws people in very quickly. But, so again, I guess Ninja's great. It's casual. It's very short.
Any other questions? All right.
Right now.
Can you tell us any of the games that you're going to have this July?
No. We don't know what they are yet. So we're doing a call for submissions. It'll probably be out in about a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. And at that point, we ask people to submit games, and then we take a look at them, and we figure out, like, we know sort of where it is and what the programming is going to look like, and then we'll select games based on that. So if any of you have game ideas, please, I would love to see submissions, or you can also just send me an email and bounce game ideas off of me. I'm always happy to chat about any sort of ideas. And so once we have that, then we'll design a program. We probably know sort of kind of what we're looking for is we probably want some like big night game that's like a big event where people chase each other around, a la Journey into the Night, or something like that. That's always a fan favorite, being chased through the streets. And then we'll probably have some installation games at the Seaport, some small social games. I was telling a couple people beforehand, the gallery where we're going to be doing the night games has these little dressing rooms. And I really want someone to make a dressing room game, and I can't figure out if it's like this sort of, you can't do that. That was that thing where Alistair, and they would come in the lockers. So if anybody has a great dressing room game, let me know. And then at the field day, there'll be a bunch of field games. And so if you have ideas for new weird sports like Charge of the Rubber Ball Brigade or, some new form of tag, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. So, Jen, I'm going to give you the mic. I'd like to introduce everyone to an important partner for the hackathon. Zohar from Kaltura is here, and wanted to just take a moment to, number one, we're doing a drawing. That's why folks gave their business cards on the way in. But I wanted to have Zohar talk a little bit about Kaltura and the technology. So Kaltura is one of the sponsors for the Story Hack, and he could probably do a much better job of describing it than me, but I've been using it for the past couple of weeks, and it's pretty awesome. So, Zohar.
Thank you. Do you think we can connect something? Or just, yeah, we can get through, because I wanted to show this as a good example of something that can be done very easy. genderremixer.com. Hey guys. Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. Who here doesn't know Kaltura? It's a good amount of hands that don't know Kaltura. That's good. So Kaltura is an online video platform. Put it simply, it's a server-side solution that helps you manage a lot of media assets, be it image files or audio files or video files, along with all the problems that involve with having rich media asset workflow within your website. So for example, one of the problems that you have when you're using online video is how do I make it playable across devices? So Kaltura provides those services, those solutions. Kaltura is an open source platform, so you can basically download it for free, do whatever you want, and create your own stuff. The reason I put this thing up is that I think this is a great example of what you can do, or the things you can do with Kaltura, and how it simplifies creating things in such an easy and fast way. The Gender Advertising Remixer is a small project put up by Rebellious Pixels, Jonathan McIntosh. Jonathan McIntosh is basically a political remixer, what you call. The idea of the Gender Remixer was that there are so many gendered toys advertising around, and he wanted to have a way to let kids to play around with videos of those advertising and see that, how basically advertisers are, brainwashing you into girls, needing to have pretty pink stuff and some very soothing, girly talks, and while boys have a lot of explosions and a lot of robots and stuff like that. So basically, let me pull this up, I'm sorry. And this project was put up in a single day. That's what's most important here around the backend and where Kaltura comes in. Basically, Jonathan came to me, was in the last year's Open Video Conference, and he came to me in the morning and said, hey, I have this cool idea where I want kids in schools to load up a web page, get a list of cool advertising. They don't need to know what it is about, and I just want to let them play. I want to let them drag one from each side and see what comes up. And so if I drag an ad from the girl part and I drag an ad from the boys part, oh, sorry, it's hard to do it left. What happens in the backend is basically, this is all client side, but the videos were pulled off from a Kaltura server. And what happens now is that we remix those videos. How do you? So you get those hilarious mix-ups, remixes. and you can sometimes see how things are actually to the beat.
Mobile headquarters converts into a massive battle station. Holy crap. G.I. Joe, are you in? You can join today at GIJoe.com. Then place everything in vehicles all separate. Batteries not included. Adults typically required as a parent for going along.
And there are basically over 800 combinations that kids can do, and we got it all over the US with schools, and we're now doing more versions of it. But the beauty of it is that, using Kaltura, this was possible in a single day with really no effort. And those are, one of the things, or part, an example of the things that we hope to see in the hackathon. Kaltura is not only sponsoring the hackathon, but ongoing we hope to help guys in StoryCode and in general in that storytelling community to create more engaging and interesting solutions with online video. We're here to give access to our APIs and access to our platform, be it hosted or the open source hosted on your servers. And we want to help create more stuff, more interesting things like that.
So you guys are having DevConnect on April 2nd, right?
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about DevConnect? Because we're giving tickets away to it. Thank you. Thanks to Kaltura.
So Kaltura DevConnect, there are two very important conferences in a year with regards to open video or online video. One is the Open Video Conference, and the other one is Kaltura DevConnect. Kaltura DevConnect basically brings together all of the people using Kaltura, be it our customers, and that includes companies like Disney and ABC and a lot of universities in the States, and even companies, major corporations like eBay and Zappos. We bring everyone together, including companies such as Avid, to talk about what is possible, what can you do with online video, how can we push it further, and actually we're adding a new track today. So this is a great opportunity to get together with those people, to listen to how things are being pushed to the limits in technology when it comes to online video, what solutions you should be expecting. We'll have talks from citizen journalism, and allowing people to, everywhere to create their own media production, all the way through, simple stuff. How do you create video gallery? Yeah.
Cool. So these are, and so the tickets these are worth $150, and Kaltura has been generous enough to award, or to grant us 3 to give. So Jen, you can do the drawing. So we're going to pick. Oh, please, run it down, quick.
And this is a one-day conference. It starts in the morning and ends in the evening.
I'm mixing it up.
And we have a great day of talks and sessions and workshops, including lunch and all that.
It should be great. So we're going to pick 3.
Oh, and it's going to be in Chelsea Piers in New York.
Excellent. Chelsea Piers in New York. The first winner is?
Greg Weinstein.
Woo. All right. So what we'll do is we'll email you tomorrow with info on how to redeem these. Here's the second one.
Patricia Smith.
Congratulations, Patricia. Excellent. And last but not least,
Alex Vachon.
Alex. All right. So we got two of the streaming gang. All right. Well, so I'll follow up with you guys on how to get those. And thanks, Zohar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the hackathon.
Yep.
Okay, we have 2 5x5s tonight, and if you're new here, 5x5 is basically if you've got a project you're working on or that you're stumped on, you can come and present a 5-minute presentation. And tonight we have, starting out, we have Noah Pivnik and the hospital safety net.
Thank you. Okay, so I've just started a project called Flow, and Flow seeks to address a problem set in a very specific domain, and that domain is hospital-based healthcare, and more specifically, hospital-based healthcare in the inner city. So these are hospitals that are sort of colloquially referred to as the safety net, serving the un- and underinsured. And everything that's happening with respect to healthcare and hospitals right now is happening exponentially so at these hospitals. So the relatively recent closing of St. Vincent's is a really good example of that. So the premise of the project is actually pretty simple and not all that revolutionary, but the premise of the project is basically that there's a correlation between patient safety and satisfaction and employee satisfaction. That's a real shocker as far as a lot of people that I've worked with in the past are concerned. But my premise is that there's a correlation between those two things and that in turn they affect the financial integrity of the institution. So the name of the project is Flow, and the name is derived from this concept called patient flow. And you can think of patient flow basically as sort of the smoothness with which the smoothness and the consistency with which the patient moves through the entire hospital system. So that's the whole hospital system from admitting to discharge and beyond. And the thing about flow is it's really easy to muck it up. In fact, it's gonna get mucked up. So the reason why that's the case is because a hospital is a very complex system that is itself comprised of a number of complex subsystems. And things that happen here and now have an impact on what happens further down the road in another part of the hospital. And the two people who have those two experiences may not be known to one another. In fact, so here's a good example, right? So like raise your hand if you've ever been to an emergency room or been with somebody, accompanied somebody to an emergency room. Okay, so keep your hands up. So drop your arm if you were seen within 20 minutes. That's actually pretty good. All right, so drop your arm if you were seen within 40 minutes. Drop your arm if you were seen in less than an hour and a half. All right, 2 hours? 3 hours? All right, so that's... Okay, so here's the thing. The reason why this is a really good example is that the experiences that you had in an emergency room actually have very little to do with how efficiently the emergency room is run and have everything to do with a whole bunch of other processes and a whole bunch of other work that's happening in other parts of the hospital. So hospitals, especially hospitals in the inner cities, hospitals that are organized, hospitals that serve the under and uninsured are extremely fractured environments, work environments. And what you'll get by way of admission from a hospital administrator is that there are silos. And silos fall along departmental lines. So emergency department, medicine, surgery, oncology, ancillary services, so on and so forth, right? Silos, by the way, is language that's borrowed from the corporate world, which I always think is sort of a dangerous thing to do. But anyway, so there are silos, sorry, I gotta wrap it up. So there are silos, right? Then there are like these traditional hierarchies, okay? But the truth of the matter is that there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on. There's doctors versus nurses, there's first shift versus second shift. The list is endless. So does everybody know what this still is from, right? So if you've ever worked at a hospital, this is what the work environment at a hospital is like, and everybody's up in arms, everybody's pointing the finger, and everything is anecdotal, there's no actionable data, and the tragedy of this situation is that it's the patient that suffers as a function of this dynamic. So I'm just going to read this really quickly. What I want to do, and the reason why they squeezed me in today is because my solution has a game layer. So I want to engage disinterested hospital staff with a game. I want to make participation totally voluntary, and I want to pay them to participate with meaningful rewards. And there's a lot of talk about what games look like, and I'm a novice with respect to a lot of these things. I can tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like this. This is a sort of Sims-y kind of console game called, I think, Hospital Havoc. It doesn't look like this. This is actually a Facebook game, and based on the, I don't even know. It's not about process improvement, I'm sure of that. Okay, so the question is, what does this game look like? Well, this is as much as I know. I think it has elements of this, right? But instead of GPS, it uses this. I think that it also has elements of this to encourage collaborative activities. And I think that you could do some really interesting stuff after people's shifts end, involving tools like this, and maybe even Robert Pratton's tool conductor. And the idea is to sort of get away from this and hopefully move more toward this. So my name is Noah. This is my email. It's pretty easy. All you need is just like the first part, and then you can find me if you just plug in NOPIVNICK. And Aina insisted that I say what I need. So what I really need is two things. I need to be able to riff with really smart game designers who are savvy about game mechanics, because badges and points is not going to cut it for this project. This is about collaborative game mechanics. And the second thing that I'm really interested in is any leads on very modest amounts of seed funds, just sort of like just to sustain myself, that have a relatively fast turnaround. So maybe something with rolling applications. And that's where you can reach me. Thank you.
Yeah, I have two. Want one? I'll hand this one off. Okay, and our next presenter is Steve Schultz, and he will be presenting on Movable Feast.
Beautiful. Actually, and I just want to make sure that I can find it. Okay. Is this working? Good. So I'm Steve Schultz, and I'm very interested in the craft of storytelling. I think, after all, it is the narrative arc that really has interested us for millennia. I feel like none of us would ever have read Virgil if he had only been texting 140 characters about the pub menu at the bar that he just checked into. So I believe that narrative content is what really compels us. Also, I've always been interested in maps. And, you know, when I was a kid, the wallpaper in my bedroom was courtesy of National Geographic. I really feel like we can do a whole lot more with the X, Y, Z, and T combination. Sorry for the geeky reference, but what that really means is a point in space at a point in time. And I think that we can do a whole lot more with story crafting around that point in space and a point in time. Now, the new mobile devices came out, and they're location aware, and they're multimedia capable, and they're ultra portable. And the combination of these three things in a single device really does have the power to change storytelling. And I think it can change storytelling as dramatically as adding sound to movies did in the 1920s. So I've been working on a company called Movable Feast Mobile Media, and our product is simply called Movable. And Movable is a platform for immersive storytelling. We give storytellers the tools to tell location-based stories and publish them to the mobile devices for consumers to experience. Right now we rely on an app for distributing the content, and I'm not going to show the app today because we just don't have time, but I'm pretty sure that most of you will have figured out by now, and some of you have probably already downloaded the app, and you'll be able to see it. You'll see that the app is immersive and it's multimedia, and it has a social component too. But above all, it's simple because we really designed it to be simple. We think that simple trumps everything. Today, I want to show you, this group, how to publish to the app. You, the story crafters. So let me just get right to the demo. Okay. All right, and good. I'm already logged in. So I've been working on a story, and actually this is a story that I want to workshop in the hackathon. But I've been working on a story that kind of takes place above and below the city of New York, the subterranean city as well as the surface streets. And somehow there's going to be a dramatic tension between two characters, one who's trapped below and one who's the consumer who's above. And what I did is I went out and I found some stuff on the internet, some Anthony Bourdain videos and some videos from that History Channel TV show that show you underneath Grand Central and underneath the Empire State Building and all this cool stuff. I haven't written the actual story yet, but I've laid out the route on a map. And you can see right now, I can't see right now because I have to look over my glasses. You can see right now that that it starts at point 1, which is underneath Grand Central, and it moves through the city, and it actually comes down to City Hall Station, which is actually really cool. And I'm going to show you the media attachment in a second, but I put a point on here for Russ and Daughters, and I'm actually going to delete that point because it's not really relevant to the story. I just want to show you how easy it is to delete points from the route. And I'm going to add a new point on the route, which is at Essex and Rivington. It's going to find Essex and Rivington. I'm going to drop a pin there. Oh, the internet connection. Wow. Are we connected to the internet? All right, let me just, maybe it logged me out. Okay. Yeah, I was logged out. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to drop the pin at Essex and Rivington. It adds the pin, it adds it to the end of the queue. I'm actually going to move it back up to where Russ and Daughters was. I'm going to delete Russ and Daughters, like I'd tried to do before. I'm going to rename Essex and Rivington to Shapiro's, because as it turns out, there's this really cool story about an underground wine cellar at that corner that nobody really knows about, and it played a part in the gangs of New York. Whatever. I'm going to include it in my story. Now, I've already gone through and added media to all of these stops on my tour, except for Shapiro's, which I've just added. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload some media from the hard drive. I'm just going to pick a couple of pictures really quick. Desktop and MVBO. Oh, there. Lost Beneath. It's under Shapiro's. I'm going to pick this picture. Upload. It'll take about a second or two. Now it's uploaded. It'll show up in my photos right here. Drag and drop. And it's done. Now when I click on submit, I've already added a couple of preview images to the tour or to the movie. I'm going to add this Shapiro's image too. And this is the description. I'm not going to use the description right now. And then one thing that I did want to focus on is this price coming soon. What this is, and it's coming really soon, within the next couple of weeks, you, the filmmaker, storyteller, journalist, whatever you want to be, you can set a price, and that price will show up in the app so that anybody who wants to download the app has to pay that price through their iTunes account. We share the revenue 50% with you. Now, those of you who have downloaded the app, you will already see what we just created in the app, and it'll be the top left in the catalog. Let me go back to this. Add this. And, oh, that's lovely. That's it.
So Steve, what do you need?
We need people to start creating stories. It's ready to go, so, oh, there we go.
So this is a free tool.
So what I just showed you is in private beta. I will invite anybody who asks me to invite them. You can reach me through my email. You can hit me up on Twitter, whatever you want to do. I'll send you invitation codes. You plug them in, create an account, and away you go. Yes, but we'll also have premium versions.
All right, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, so just a couple of things in closing. Sign up for the hackathon, please, if you're interested. Contact us for more information or visit hack.storycode.org. We're going to have our next immersion, which is going to be a business immersion. So we're doing these immersions, which are these smaller, more workshop-focused meetings in the flex space, the VIP room over there. The last one was a tech immersion. It seemed to go pretty well. So this next one is going to be a business immersion. It's going to be more focused on where and how to raise funds for your project and how to go about that process. Sparrow Hall will be joining me in running that as well. Also, if there are any interactive writers, people that have experience writing interactive fiction, and you're looking for freelance work, let me know. A couple folks have asked me, and I just thought I would toss it out to the group. Send me an email or just contact us, and we'll hook you up. And that's it. You had something, Jen? Yeah.
I just had two last things. As you know, we're gearing up for the hackathon, and we are looking for volunteers. So if you would like to be a volunteer, please see me. We're going to be having drinks up at the cafe afterwards. You can see me there, or you can reach me on at jen@storycode.org, 1N, or you can find me on Twitter. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.